Hello, everyone, and welcome to Tapping into Your Creativity this afternoon in my studio. We have guest artist joining us, Wendy Shragg. She will be joining us right now. Can't wait to have her, and she can tell you all about her amazing work and what she does and what she's inspired by. And there she is.
Hello.
Hello, my friend. How are you?
I'm doing well, thank you. How are you?
Good. Thank you so much for joining us today. I'm so excited to have you
Thank you. It's
here
great to be
live
here.
in my studio. And not only do I know Wendy, we are friends, but we're also colleagues. We work in the same studio. She's my studio mate. We are one of three. Debbie Walk Designs, she's one, and Wendy is the second one. And so we are thrilled to have you today here joining us and telling us all about your creativity and your process and what inspires you. And so welcome.
Thank you. Thank you so
So
much.
tell us a little bit about who you are, where are you from, and where are you working right now?
So I am Wendy Shragg, and I'm from the Twin Cities, born and raised, and have lived here my entire life. I am a mixed media artist, and I have a studio with Sandra and Debbie Wolk in the Casket Arts building in Northeast Minneapolis.
And are you now being affected a little bit by COVID and what's happening in our city right now? Are you working from home? What are you doing right now?
I am. Before I started with my studio at Casket Arts, I had a makeshift studio in my basement, and that's where I am right now. It's not very glamorous, but it certainly works. And it's been incredible. It's been an adjustment to be back at home, working, trying to bring supplies home in a rush and have everything that I could possibly need, which you can never have. But I've been working at it, and it's been really interesting. I've been able to create. It was difficult in the beginning, I have to say. There was the mindset of, should I really be doing this right now? I'm doing something that brings me joy, and I know that that's important to do every day. But
Right.
I felt like there was so much going on in the world that was so uncertain and unpleasant happening. And this part of me felt guilty doing something that I did enjoy. And I also felt a little bit of a creative block, not quite sure how to approach it. So it took me a little bit once I came back home and tried to get settled in again. Obviously new working space and adjusting to that. But the mindset of what happens, how do I now move forward with this process? And is there a way in doing this that I can affect other people, that I can help other people?
Right.
Because that's something that I've always liked to do. And I think it's important in the art process, in anything really, but to be sharing, to be giving, to share everything you learn along the way. It's so important. As an artist, that's how we all learn and
To
grow.
be present and to live what we're living in right now and to feel what we're feeling. It's all valid, and we are creators, and it's really cool to be able to create that spark into somebody's house right now where they don't have that creativity necessarily, or that they have that mindset. So it's really important that we as creators can inspire people at home. And
Right.
I think that you're doing that with your work. And tell us a little bit about your background. Where did you go to school, and how did you get into art, and what kind of artist do you think you are?
Well, like I said, I consider myself a mixed media artist. And mixed media means that the world is my sandbox. I can play with any toy in it in the creation of art. And I love that. I love to try out new supplies, to push things to their limits, to see what I can do in the creative process, how things interact with one another. And it's play. To me, it really is. It's work, but it's play. And I think that's wonderful to be able to have that in my life.
Right.
I did go to school at the University of Minnesota in their design program. And for me, it really clarified some of the things that I just lived in my life. It was very interesting. There were things that I learned through that education that made me think, oh, so there's really a name for what I just sort of inherently knew or felt. And it solidified that for me. And
Yes.
I can't say that I ever really pursued a career in the field of design, honestly. I mean, I applied it more to the way I lived my life.
Right.
And it was very useful in that. And I think it did play out in lots of different areas. I've done a lot of things. And I have to say that's one of the things that I've struggled with, and that I did struggle with in deciding to take this leap of faith.
Yeah.
You know, I've been a travel agent. I'm an esthetician. I have made jewelry, which I still do a little bit of. I have always been a creative. I tend to be a type A personality. I'm very hard on myself, and the perfectionism piece comes into play. And most people think of artists as kind of that freewheeling, fly by the seat of your pants. You don't care what happens.
Right.
So I'm trying to merge those two, that type A personality into the creative body. And how does that happen? And hopefully I'm finding the happy medium there.
Yes.
It seems to be working for me. Sometimes I have to tell myself, you know, not to be so hard on myself, to just let things go and see what happens and play and explore. And that's part of what I love about this
So
process.
do you consider yourself self-taught then?
I am.
You
Yep,
are.
I am. Because I didn't really have any formal art training. Design was more the principles of color and how things relate to one another. And this art process has really been an exploration. It's been self-taught. And, you know, I would say my entire life I love to create. And I grew up very shy, unsure of myself, and it's hard to talk about. But anyway,
It's emotional, and
it is.
you know, it's part of our journey to feel the
It is.
emotion. And you know, sometimes, you know, we have to deep inside where it's not as nice, and
Right.
I feel those, you know, emotions, and hopefully we can convey that. Not
Yep.
all the time we're happy dandy, and it's not, you know, an easy road. I think it's a
Right.
hard road to go through, and
Yep.
you know, you have that inside of you that in your work in particular, you love to connect your history, and
Right.
you love to connect people into your work. So your
Yep.
work is a very emotional,
Right. Right.
you know, very connected into people. And
Yep.
so I believe that there is, you know, something, you know, to say about going into your own and really feeling it, and then
Right.
portraying that. So
Yeah. I
I
think
think
we
that you're a
each.
perfect example of that, and you'll show us why in a couple minutes here.
Yeah, I think, yeah, I think so. I think we each have our own stories, and those stories are so important. And oftentimes people don't feel that it's okay to share that. And that's something that I've learned, and it is okay. And it doesn't necessarily matter how you share that. It might be through words, through text, through writing. It might be through art. It might be through cooking. Maybe it's through music. It could be anything.
Right.
And those are all creative outlets, but all a way to be able to express what's inside.
100%.
And I had this nagging feeling. It was probably 2 or 3 years ago that there was really something more that I needed to be doing, and I just wasn't sure what it was. And I thought for a long time, and I just couldn't put my finger on it. And then I realized that it was creativity, and it was just begging me to come and play.
Right.
But then there was that piece of me that was fearful and worried, you know, what would other people think if yet again I decided to change my career path, if I made this shift. You know, here I was at 50 some years old and reinventing myself, and was that really possible? And I'm here to prove that yes, it is.
Yeah.
And
there's never an age to start creating, or
there's not,
you know, changing your path and going where your heart is telling you to go. There is no doubt. There's no age. There's no age to stop learning. And you just have to follow your heart and be happy and make yourself happy, because if you're
Exactly.
happy, then everyone around you is happy.
Right.
So if you're not, then everyone around you is miserable. So,
Right.
So tell me a little bit about your playground kids. Let's talk about how that came about.
Yeah, the playground kid. Well, actually, there's a precursor to the playground kids.
Okay.
And that is my story people. And the story people, I'll show you an example. The story people, anytime that I did any work in painting, in drawing, I guess I did have a drawing class in college. And in that class, we had to draw the human figure. And every time I drew, I left the face blank. I had perfectly shaped head, body, all details were there, but the face was blank. And to me, it was that fear again of, that's recognizable. Somebody knows what a face should look like. And if I didn't do that right, was that a failure? And at that point in my life, I didn't really have enough courage to say it's okay.
Right.
And through this art exploration, I've come to learn that it is. And with these, the story people, and I know you won't be able to see the words on here.
I'm going to actually just turn off the comments right now.
Okay.
And yeah, we know that on Instagram, unfortunately, we read backwards, and there's nothing to do about that.
No way to fix it. We've tried.
No way to fix it. So yeah, go ahead.
So when I started to create these, they were just, again, explorations. I played with backgrounds on these pieces and used scraps of paint that were left over from larger paintings I was making, and just kind of started to play with these whimsical faces.
Yeah.
And the first one I did, I realized there was a message in there. Once I finished it, there was a message. I looked into her eyes, and what she told me was what I wrote on the piece. And that's the way each of these developed. So this one says she dreamed of one day being on TV, but I don't think this is quite what she envisioned it, or quite how she envisioned it.
Yeah, that's very true.
I've got a couple more. This one is, today was her birthday, and that was her favorite day of them all. And again, I think the faces, because there was that ability to play, to be more whimsical with it, opened me up to that freedom of expression. And the messages that they had were so heartfelt. And people would say, well, do you know what it's going to say before you do it? Like, do you sit down with a piece of paper and write it out? And I don't do that at all. This is truly an intuitive process. And when I look at that person who emerges, that's what she tells me, or he tells me.
So that informed you into what became the Playground Kids series.
Yeah, the Playground Kids, right. So the Playground Kids are, they're a grouping of kids who represent kids from any place in the world. I had somebody at a show that I did who saw these pieces and said, well, do you have any who look like me? And she was African American. And, you know, I kind of went, I don't, but it was something that I was always very sensitive about. I didn't want to do something that looked stereotypical in any way. I wanted to be inclusive, and I wanted people to feel comfortable with the art that I was producing. And it gave me that dive, or the board to jump off of, the starting point.
Yeah.
Right. To explore a little bit more. And there was a project, it was called the 100-Day Project. And I started to use that. It was every day you had to do something. And I chose that as a way to hold myself accountable to my art practice, because I had started to slip a little bit and I wasn't really working every day. And I know the importance of that. So I thought, this is a way I'm going to be really gentle with myself in what being creative means. And if that means that I cook a meal and put that on the table beautifully that night, that's my creativity, and that's what I'm going to show. And my dad was ill at the time, and I really wanted a way to be more portable with my art. I wanted something that I could do and be with him.
Anywhere.
Right. Yeah. Right. So I bought myself an iPad Pro. I had no idea how to use this thing. Didn't come with an instruction manual, and self-taught. I worked with it. I had done some work in watercolor, kind of played with images of children's faces. And that's why I say this was the springboard for that, the faces.
Right.
And these little innocent faces. I can show you the first one that I ever did on the iPad. So this is all digital. I'm going to move my camera down so you can see. But this is all digital. And basically what the iPad lets me do with a stylus is use that stylus as a brush, a pen, a pencil, an eraser, a smudging tool. And I just thought, let me see if I can recreate what I've been doing in watercolor on this iPad. So that was the first one. And I would post every day all the way through. This started maybe 35 days into the project. And as it went, it became almost a challenge for myself to see how far I could take these images. You know, could I really perfect my craft in 100 days?
And you sure did.
And I did. So there's one from further into the project. And it just speaks so much to what practice can do. Dedication to a process. And, you know, in thinking about creativity, people tend to think that either you have it or you don't. And I don't believe that. I think that in reality, creativity
We can't see you, Wendy. Sorry.
Oh, sorry. Creativity isn't an innate quality that you're born with. It's something that you can develop. You know, people aren't born knowing how to play the trumpet or how to play the piano.
Right.
You do that because you practice. And there's a reason that they call art a practice, because that's what you need to do. And
can you show us how on that program you were able to create, because we can actually see a step-by-step on how Wendy created all her images, and it's pretty incredible.
Whoops, that's the finished image.
Yep. So
and then
this is using Procreate, but you still need to be extremely, extremely talented to be able to use this tool, because it's not easy. It takes practice. And as you can see from the first image that Wendy showed us to this one, it is a complete different, more sophisticated. It has a story behind it. It definitely tells a story of the little girl that we're seeing. You want to know more about her, where she is. And it's just really incredible. I love to see that whole process of, you know, on how it really works out on an iPad. And so you really took it to a whole different level. Can you show us now the actual prints that you made from that?
Yeah. So I do have, because they're all digital, the images, I have a local printer that I use, and they're printed on archival paper with archival ink. And then there are, if you go to my website, there's a whole list of words of wisdom that these kids have. And they're messages that are both empowering and positive, and the types of things that people need to hear, whether it's speaking to a child, whether it's speaking to your inner child, whether it's speaking to you as an adult. This one says, you are enough.
Yeah, and you have every single kid in the book that you can identify with, that you can feel that you are part of, that, you know, that you feel connected to. And I think you hit the nail right there when you started these, because you are really connecting people to find themselves in all of your, and all your sayings are incredible too. I mean, that's very much part of the story. So there's one that you're showing a lot of.
It's a larger composite, and it's for people who can't decide which image they want. There are so many people who look and think, I don't know, I can't choose. So this is it. And the message is, be nice, the end.
Exactly. Be nice, the end.
Yep.
There's nothing more.
One other composite. This one's got more kids on it, but do it for the children, which speaks to so many things.
It does speak to so many things.
Yeah. And I created one recently during this whole COVID lockdown, quarantine, whatever we want to call it. And it's I protect you, you protect me.
And that is exactly right. That's why we all need masks out there.
Yep.
So do you want to now talk to us a little bit about your family connection that you started? So I know you did a lot of collage with your mom who passed away many years ago.
Yeah.
Your grandma, you had generational collages. And I think that's, I think, when you really started connecting what your art was going to be about.
Yep. Yep. So it was about 1.5 years ago, and I started to go through some old photos. And I was thinking about experiences that shape us as we grow and develop into the people that we are. And at what point does that innocence of childhood disappear? Is there some defining moment that happens? Is it something in our lineage that carries down? What is it, and how can we bring that back to our lives today? And I honestly, I sat with these photos of myself and kind of did a deep dive into looking in the eyes of that toddler self and asking the question, why and when? And it developed into a series that I called Childhood Reimagined. And how I could bring some of that innocence back. And again, these are all digital pieces that I've created. I will bring the camera down here so you can see them. So they are on my iPad, but with photos of myself.
Yeah, look at that.
Collage work.
Yeah, it's remarkable what you did and how you learned to use, a very different tool to make art. So there's no limit as to how you make your art,
No,
and
right.
It doesn't mean that by not using a pencil or a brush, it doesn't mean that you're not creating. You're 100% creating. And
right.
so, yeah, I think that has so much conversation, and and for you it has so much meaning, because it's almost going into your unconsciousness and kind of finding your dreams, or what you were thinking at that time, or what you could be thinking at that time. And so, I mean, that's probably you having a birthday party when you were 4 years old. I mean, and you recreated that. And what did that look like now or then?
Right.
So,
and kind of a fun fact about this one, this takes parts of other pieces of art that I've done. So the background was a large painting that I created. The balloon dog was from that same painting. The banner, the happy birthday banner, was something that I created out of watercolor on little pieces of paper and added that.
Yes.
And then it was all in the photo, and I added butterfly wings just because it was fun.
Right. And you added the collage, that's when you really started doing your collages. So I think it would be a great segue right now to show us how you work on collage, and how you, what materials you use, and how you go about it.
Sure. So I'm just going to get set up a little bit here.
Yeah.
I've got a piece of paper.
What kind of paper do you use, Wendy?
I'm using watercolor paper, and I like it just because it's a heavier paper. It's got some nice body to it. It holds up really well to paint, to water, to anything. And if you get enough paint on it, you can actually sand down into it using sandpaper, which is good.
Yeah, that gives it another texture.
Right. So one thing that I've found is sort of paralyzing is looking at that blank sheet of paper or that blank canvas. And what can we do to change that? So I always like to start by just making marks. So I'll take anything that I have, could be a pencil, could be a pen. I've got a Caran water soluble pastel, and sometimes I'll have music on, sometimes I don't, but just start with mark making and the freedom of what that allows.
Without rhyme or reason, you're just going and
and off the edges and back on.
Yeah.
And then I may come in with something a little bit darker and make some marks. And it's kind of fun to explore with different marks that you can make, and how different things make different marks. So with this, I can get a really nice dark line. Can you see?
Yeah,
what I'm
I
doing?
can see. Yep.
But then
if I will be listing all the materials, so
and then if I come in with a pencil, you know, we get this very different line. If I hold the pencil like I would to write with it versus holding it at the end and just kind of letting it do its thing, and the quality of line that you can get from that.
Yep, having no control on it.
Right. And then you can come in with some paint and different brushes. And I love to see what different brushes do and how they create different marks. So, oops.
There we go.
Yeah, okay. Just double check where I was.
Yeah.
So, you know, what happens if I mix paint on the brush? Can I get some interesting color combinations that way? What happens if I paint over marks that I've made? Well, that one, it's water soluble, so it smears, it darkens that color a little bit. Yes. What happens if I come into it and I add a little bit of white? What kind of color can I get from that? If I take a different type of a brush, more of a dry brush, I've got a fan brush. What can I do if I just spin that brush on the paper? And you'll notice in a lot of the art that I create, I like circles too.
Yes, you do.
And I think circles are, you know, there's no beginning, there's no end. And I think it speaks to connection with one another. Again, it's not the connection that you would typically think, but in its own way, it speaks to connection.
Yes.
The other thing I like to do is just take different things to make marks. So if I take the end of a pencil with some paint on it, what kind of a mark does that make? If I take a credit card and dip the end of it into paint, what can I do with that?
Oh, I've never used my credit card.
Yeah. It's the safest way to use a credit card, trust me. But then you can also scrape, you can add paint this way. And then sometimes I'll take a spray bottle and just spray into what I've got and see how that moves the paint. Maybe I'll use my finger, kind of blend a little bit. But what ends up happening is I get pieces, and I always, when I work, I always have a piece of paper next to me. I don't like to waste paint in the studio. Yes. I like to make sure that anything that I'm doing is used. I don't want to throw paint down a drain anywhere. So I always have paper next to me that I just clean off my brushes on. So when I'm done with something, I'll just give it a...
Exactly. And then you can use those for collaging after.
You can use them for collage, or these are the types of pieces of paper that I use as the starts for the background on my story people.
Okay.
Or my collage work. They end up being great backgrounds for the collage work.
Yes.
Yeah. And once that process starts, it's always easier to work on a piece that's been activated.
Correct.
Whether it's a canvas, whether it's a paper.
Yes.
You can always cover up things, but it's amazing sometimes the magic that happens.
That's what I posted today on my Instagram. So I started with, this is my piece of artwork that I had, or my piece of paper. And then all of the elements that you see here are collage. So that I painted literally on craft paper. And you just regular craft paper, and you can paint on it, and then you can just add elements to it, and all of a sudden you have a great composition. So I think that you are doing that, and I'm starting to do that in my own work. So the possibilities are endless, which is a good thing. So okay, Wendy.
And I do have a piece here that, again, it's just something that I've had next to me as I've been painting. I've used some stencils on it to kind of add some interest. I've done some stamping into it, all kinds of different things. And from this, I would then start to collage into it. So I always have...
What do you use for, other than, do you use like magazines, newspapers, stuff like that?
I do. Again, I always have a stash of stuff. Okay. Anything that comes in the mail, anything that's packaging. It could be, like you said, brown paper. It could be the lining of an envelope that's got a really interesting pattern in it. Maybe it's some paint swatches that I've been testing on, and those can be torn up and put in. So old book pages and things that have shapes cut out of them.
Yeah.
You know, it's the ever popular Indian on the Tootsie Pop.
I love that.
Stamps from mail. Anything.
Yeah.
There is nothing sacred. Anything can go into it. So typically what I would start to do on something like this, let me just grab, I use matte medium. And matte medium is essentially paint without the pigment in it. It adheres better than any glue that I've found.
Yeah.
And I love to use that. And I'm just going to find a piece here. Let's see what I've got. Something interesting that I can add. Let's just take, because I've got, and I've got some color here, I want to do something that's a little bit different from what I've got. So I'm going to take a piece that's got some black on it. And this is actually on tissue. And I've just printed with stencil on tissue. So I'm just going to put some of the matte medium down and spread it out. Except I just stuck my finger in black paint, sorry. One of the hazards of just reaching and not looking. So I'm just going to spread this, and I'm going to place that down. Whoops, and it tore, but that's no big deal. It's just, I kind of feel like wherever anything is meant to end up is where it ends up.
Yes.
So I'm going to spread that out. And when I'm working, it's always one move informing the next. It's this dance between light and dark, between color and black and white, and just seeing where pieces take me and what might be
building a composition, which is
exactly.
Yeah.
And you know, some of that I do think about, some of it just happens by accident. There may be things that are just interesting. Here's a magazine page. So I'm going to take a piece from this. It's peas.
I love the color.
Yeah. So we're going to put that down, add a little bit more. And I'm not really at this point caring much about what I'm putting things over.
Can you bring the artwork down a little bit?
Oh, yep. Sorry.
Yeah, there we go.
Better? Okay. Do you want maybe if I move my camera?
It's all good. It's all good.
Okay.
You can see it. Yep.
Okay.
Yep.
Okay. And then I've got some more tissue. And the thing I love about the tissue is how it allows the other colors to show through it when I put it down.
Yeah.
So even though I've got white
tissue paper.
Yes. So I've got the white printed on this, but when I put it down, the part that doesn't have the paint on it almost disappears, so color can come through.
Right. Which is you know, I love the tissue paper because if you wet it, it's almost like a translucent, you know, layer that you can keep working and working on that. So that's, you know, really fantastic.
And then here's an old book page.
Yeah.
And again, that circle can come through. Oops.
And you can see how fast Wendy's working right now just to show us, but you can really like take your time or not and see what happens. You know, you can make an exercise of, you know, how fast can I make a collage and what happens to that, or how slow can I make one and what happens to that. And that's a really good exercise for you to make.
The other thing I like to do when I'm creating the collage is think about what I've done first. And in this case, it's all been pretty organic shapes. Nothing's had any really clean edges to it. Everything's been torn and it's kind of random. Yeah. So sometimes I'll just cut a piece that's got really nice, crisp, clear edges to it and put that down. And it's amazing how interesting that can be, the contrast of that over something that is less structured. Right. Yeah. So. Right.
Yeah, exactly.
And the contrast here of the dark against light, which is really amazing. Love that.
Yeah, we always, we want to look into the positive and the negative and all of that. So
yeah, and I love graphic arts and fonts and all of that. Yeah. So it's always
a perfect. Once you're done that, it's a perfect segue to take us now around your studio and show us what you have on the wall, because I think we'll have a better idea of what you're talking about.
Yeah. Yep. Okay. So I'm going to turn my camera around. And I told you, this isn't fancy. It's makeshift. It's a storage
okay.
room.
It's great. You
But
have an amazing space to be creative, and that's all we want.
Well, and you know, again, there's lots of stuff here that I brought home from the studio. So when I first started, it really didn't look like this down here. I didn't have a lot of what I have now. Quite honestly, this is where I started. It's my freezer.
Oh,
Hey.
I'm like, what?
So, yep. And that, I mean, that is proof that really anybody can do this, that you don't need anything fancy. You don't need a fancy easel. You don't need anything major. I mean, I used to cover the freezer with plastic, and I would tape paper up
Use it as a wall.
and that was my easel. That's where I worked.
Yeah.
And, you know, then thanks to my husband and one of my sons, we kind of makeshifted a storage room, and this is what I got.
That's awesome. It looks amazing.
Thank
you have a great setup.
Thank you. It's really fun. It's, you know, it's a pleasure to be able to do.
Can you take us closer to see the big painting on the wall?
Sure.
Yeah.
So this one, actually, I'm a little too close there. This one was inspired by a couple different things. It was the playground kids and the be nice the end, the saying be nice the end, which I thought, again, was just such an important message and kind of sums it all up.
Yeah, it kind of does, doesn't it?
And the background of this, although there's not any collage in it, the paint technique that I used is reminiscent of collage.
100%. I can totally tell.
Yeah. And we live in an area where there's a train that runs behind our house, and the train oftentimes has graffiti on it. And I'm just fascinated by watching the trains. And, you know, the colors and the art. I mean, I think graffiti is spectacular art.
Yep.
And there's so much that you can learn from that. And I think that's how this piece got its start.
Yes. Yes. Now let's move to the left.
Yep. So these pieces are
those on board or on paper?
They're created on board, and then they're mounted on, they're created on paper and they're mounted onto board. Okay. So this is a series that I call Conceptual Beginnings. And it started for me as a study. It was a study about color and how color worked together and values of color. And in doing that, I developed these circles. Again, there are the circles.
Yeah,
and I think
they keep coming back to you.
Yep. And I think these pieces speak to our connection to one another, the spaces that each of us occupy, and how we are so similar yet so different, but we all coexist.
Yes.
And 100%. Some of the pieces, so I've got that piece.
Yes.
And that piece, which also have some text in the background. So this one, the word journey is written in there. And it's just obscured, but it's there. Yeah. The message is there. Yeah. So those have been really fun to work on. I've absolutely loved those. I can get a little closer so you can see.
I enjoy seeing the details on them because I've seen them up close and personal, and they have so much detail that you can just lose yourself.
Yep, they're all collage, and again, these start out pretty much the same with that piece of paper that I've got that is my playboard, my cast off, if you will. And I collage over it and just keep developing, keep working it and developing it.
Yeah, I really enjoy the black pieces on that, which is the wording that you're
Thank you.
Really
Yep. So that is part of a series that I've got. And then the most recent series, and this was inspired by the time home and feeling like I really wanted a way to connect with people. And like people needed a way to share love and to let people know they were thinking about them. It was sort of like that virtual hug that you could give to somebody that you can't really give them right now.
Yeah, and these are the virtual love.
Yep, so this series is called From My Heart to Yours. And they started out as reclaimed wood. I saw some wood that we had sitting behind our house. And my husband was kind enough to cut them up for me into blocks. And I did some collage work, created the hearts on the front, And then the backs, because I wanted them to be enjoyed from all sides, the back is a reclaimed book page.
Oh, I love that.
And the magic just comes from
The
whatever appears. Yep. So coming back to herself is what that one says. Whoops, I guess they're dominoes too. This one is simple enough.
Yeah.
And
Wow.
I posted a collection of these onto my website.
Yeah.
And people snapped them up. It was incredible. I was so grateful that there was such a wonderful response to them. And
Nice.
I've now created their big sisters. So while the small ones,
I love that.
Yeah, the minis, and they have the same thing on the back, and they stand free. The minis are 3.5 by 5.5, and the larger ones are 7 by 9. So they pair really nicely together.
Yeah, I love
just
that.
really fun.
And I love the meaning of it, and I love, you know, where they come from and why they came from, and how they were created and why you're creating them. And they come from such an honest place that they're shining through. So I'm feeling the love, Wendy.
Yeah, and I think the heart is such a universal symbol. You know, it speaks to everybody. And it's,
and I know that you have one on the wall there that has many hearts in there.
Yep, I've got a couple of those that are larger, 12 hearts on those. And those are, again, on paper, but then they're on a wood cradle board. Yep. So those can be hung on the wall. Yeah.
Well, now you can switch the camera so we can see you.
Back to me.
And so Wendy, tell us where we can find you. And I'm going to turn on the comments actually.
Okay.
For a minute, just to see if anyone has a question for Wendy. This would be a great time to ask. But like always, I'm going to make sure that when I upload this interview, we'll talk about all of Wendy's materials and make sure that I give you all the details. And hard to shop, which is interesting. She loves the hearts, which I know why she loves the hearts. Anyways, if you have any questions, please feel free to either, what do you seal your collage with? I guess that's a question that is.
I use the matte medium for most of them, depending on how they end up as a final product. Matte medium for most of them. Some of them I do put a wax coating on, just to seal in everything. But I always like to put the matte medium because that protects everything underneath.
Yeah. Do you put any varnish or anything at the very end, or just with the medium?
The matte medium is what I use as my varnish because I don't like a real high shine finish on them. I like the organic feel because the wood has that feel to it, and I think it just marries well together.
Exactly.
So I just use the matte medium.
All right. Well,
really well.
Thank you, Wendy, so much for sharing all your incredible body of work, and keep creating, keep inspiring. And thank you for joining me today, and for joining me in this incredible art project, the COVID art project that tap into your creativity in my studio. Will hopefully make so much money for Feeding America. And this is just going to be another great asset to the collection that we'll have for May. So stay tuned. I'm still waiting for a couple pieces for the April collection to come out. When that comes out, I will show you all. And hopefully there will be one incredible buyer that wants to give a ton of money to Feeding America. And that's the whole purpose of this. So thank you so much. And we'll see you.
I would just like to encourage anybody, if they're feeling that tug on their heartstrings to be creative, to do it. Just do it. Even if it's spending 5 minutes a day doing something creative, whatever that might be. It doesn't have to be art, but whatever that might be, do it. Listen to 100%. That. Listen to
well, tell us very quickly before we leave, where can we find you?
So I have a website. It's wendyshragg.com. I'm on Instagram, wendyshragg_designs. and
Perfect.
Facebook at Wendy Shragg Designs.
Perfect. We'll look for you, and thank you again. And we'll see you on Saturday with Robin Marie and her incredible tech savvy, everything that you want to know about technology and how to use every platform. This is your girl. So we'll see you on Saturday. And thank you for joining us.
Thank
Take care,
you.
everyone. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thanks, Wendy.
Thank you.